Good morning, all participants. Welcome to our first webinar 2020. My name is Heather Holder, Labor Officer here at the Labor Department. This morning with me are Labor Officers Gail Grant and Elmondo Innes, who will be answering any questions you have on this particular topic. This morning, I will be presenting the SHOPS Act 2015-30. Let us first look at the definition of a shop. A shop in this act is defined as any premises or place in which a person conducts, manages, or carries on a retail or wholesale trade or business, or conducts business by providing services in respect of the sale or hire of commodities. All right, for the purpose of explaining this, I'll just look at the shops rather in two sections. Section 1, shops where there is a relationship between the employer and employee, or where a person works under a contract of employment or services, sorry. For example, statutory deductions are taken, such as NIS, PAYE, from the relevant salaries to be disbursed to the relevant departments. Some of the shops that fall under this category are airport shops, bakeries, butcher shops, hardwares, dry goods, supermarkets, restaurants, motor vehicle shops, gas stations, and pharmacies. Section 2, family shops. Okay, before I move on, just let me remind you that we have a chat forum and you're invited to pose your questions to the panel. Okay, our second section are the family shops. These shops are shops where often referred to as the mom or dad shops or the one-door shops. And these are where family members, such as the children, nieces, cousins, usually provide services to the public. There are no employees in these shops. In conducting shop inspections, labor officers are expected to go throughout the island to ensure that the occupiers are adhering to the labor legislation. For example, we ensure that the correct rate of pay is paid to the employees. That is, the minimum wage as you recognize in Barbados is $250 a week, $50 a day, or $6.25 per hour. These are some of the things that we look at in going into the shops. As we get a bit deeper into the legislation, I would address the other things the labor officers look for in conducting shop inspections. Okay, we will now look at the opening and closing of shops. This can be found under section 4.1 of your app. Shops can be opened from 7 a.m. on Monday through to Sunday at 10 p.m., except on a closed day. You may ask, what is a closed day? Closed days are Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Independence Day, and Christmas Day. All right, let us look at Independence Day. We recognize in Barbados that on a Sunday, no public holidays are celebrated. So because of that, if the Independence Day happened to fall on a Sunday, then the celebrations for the public holiday would be done on the Monday, the 1st of December. The first schedule of the Shops Act speaks to certain shops which are not subjected to any opening hours. These include shops which engage in the sale or purchase of any drugs or surgical appliances required in the case of illness of any persons or animals. Please note that the shop is only opened for the sale of such items and must be kept closed except for the admission and exit of the customer. Shops located in theaters or cinemas, concert halls, primarily engage in the sale of refreshments. Shops engage in the sale of cooked food, alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverages. Shops engage in the sale of bread, milk products, or fresh meat. Other shops which are not subject to be opened to opening hours are these shops engage in the sale of newspapers, sale of petrol, sale of spare parts for motor vehicles. Shops engage in the on the premises of hotels or guest houses, sale of handicraft. These are among some of the shops which are not subjected to be open on a closed day. The legislation at 5 also states that if an occupier has to open a business, a shop, on a closed day, he has to apply for a license. This license is granted through the Chief Labor Officer. When permission is granted, the employer or occupier would be informed in writing. The Labor Department asks that you provide your request to the Labor Department 2 weeks prior to that public holiday. This then gives the department adequate time to make the necessary investigations for the approval or non-approval of that application. If approval is done, the occupier would be informed, as I said before, in writing, and they will be given a time period in which to open their shop on that particular public holiday. It is normally 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. The public holidays that I did not mention would not be referred to as closed days. These shops can be open at any time, some of which are Cont'd Day, Whitsuntide or birthday, those kind of bank holidays that I did not mention before, can be open on a public holiday. Okay, we will now look at working hours, wages of shop assistant. This can be found at 6.1 of your Shops Act. An employee is not to work, hours of work are not supposed to exceed 40 hours in any 1 week. 5 days a week and 8 hours, not exceeding 8 hours in any day. We recognize that this is not always possible, in particular with the COVID-19 period. Employees can hardly afford to give an employee 8 hours or 40 hours in a week. The legislation states that if an employee works in excess of 40 hours, 8 hours in a day, or 5 days a week, that employee must be provided with overtime pay at the rate of time and a half. If the employee, for example, work Sunday to Monday, they must be granted time and a half as the rate of pay for the overtime period. However, if an employees work on a public holiday or an off day, they are then required to be paid at a rate of double time. An example here is where an employer or occupier calls an employee to work on an off day. When the person is rostered off, the employer is then obligated to pay at double time. At the Labor Department, we often have queries where persons, the employer or the employee, may call the Labor Department and tell us that their work, or they're expected to work 36 hours a week. The question to us is, if the employee works additional 5-6 hours in that week, will that person qualify for double time or for overtime at the overtime rate? The answer is yes. The reason being that the standard hours or the contract of that employee says that the person's hours usually on a weekly basis is 36 hours a week. So because of that, the employer has to give the employee the time and a half or double time, whatever the case may be. Lunchtime. If an employee works with an organization and works in excess of 4 hours, you are expected to be granted hours lunch. What the law says is that having worked over 4.5 hours, you qualify for 1 hour lunch. We've had cases within the Labor Department where persons complain, or even in doing shop inspections, we recognize that persons are being granted 30 minutes or 45 minutes lunch break. That's a breach of the legislation, and it must not be upheld. An employee must provide an employee 1 hour lunch after working 4.5 consecutive hours. Anything outside of that hour, it must be some agreement between the employer and the employee. Remember that a lunch hour for anyone is not paid for. Okay, let's continue. An occupier shall keep a record for each week in respect of every shop assistant. What the law is saying here is that it is very important, it's vital that an occupier, you say occupier, have a record of each shop assistant. This is very vital, as I said, because a person cannot always rely on one's memory and need to have things in black and white for ease of reference. In addition to that, you would need records for accounting purposes. For example, as I was talking about the double time and stuff just now, if a person worked double time or have to pay double time or time and a half, then the employee must have adequate records in order to do the calculation of that payment. Rest period. The legislation allows for persons to be given rest period. In most cases, you'll find that an employer would give one day in the week, and then maybe on a Sunday, more often than not. So that is, if that is not done, that is a breach of the legislation. Persons need to be able to rest after working for adequate amount of hours in a particular day. We want to expect that an employee work, let's say, like an evening shift, maybe 3 to 10, and then expect the employee to return to work with few hours rest. That's what he meant to say. So you need to make sure that persons are given enough time to rest so that they refresh and can perform on the next day. Seating to be provided for shop assistants. This is a very important part of the app. We go into shops and recognize that the employer might have seats available, but the shop assistants are not allowed to sit. The law says that persons must be provided with seating. The cashiers as well should have some way to sit in order to perform their role adequately. Every occupier, that's the employer, must provide first aid kit for the workers. These are some of the things when we go into the shops that we look for. We expect that you would have basic things like plaster. They ask that you refrain from providing the workers with alcohol, not alcohol, you should have alcohol, with aspirins and any kind of tablets. It's important to have alcohol, that is one of the essential things. Adequate ventilation, it could be fans, it could be natural air, it could be air conditioned. That is what we look for. Make sure that these things are clean, that person's health will be not at risk. Suitable bathroom facilities, adequate supply of drinking water, safe means of access. Supply of drinking water, we expect that the employer would have provide the workers with some kind of maybe some pipes, bottled water, whatever. We don't expect the persons to be exposed to the bathroom pipes. We expect that the employees are provided with free water as opposed to having to buy. When we go out in the field, we recognize that a lot of persons tell us that they have to go out and buy water. The employer is supposed to provide drinking water for the staff. Safe means of access. This is where you have a situation where an employer has several doors in his workplace, but one of the doors are blocked in with boxes with stocks, different things that are going to be used in the store. This is not acceptable. If something happens within the store, we expect that persons will be able to easily vacate the place. So you need to have easy access to moving around. No shop assistant should be required before his consent to work overtime. The day observed as the day of religious worship, and there is an offense. The legislation here says that a shop assistant must not be forced to work overtime. In saying this, however, the Labor Department would not engage in persons coming to us and telling us that they have to work overtime. And when we do our investigation, it is that you are a kitchen assistant and you work from 8:30 to 4:30, and at 4:30 you are still prepping meat, vegetables, things like that. And at 4:30 you want to leave the things on the table and go because it is 4:30 and it is your time. We would not allow that. That to my mind is not really overtime. It is part of what you do in a day, and you need to complete that particular task before you say it is my time and I'm not working overtime and leave the business. So that would not be tolerated from the Labor Department. Overtime, the employer must inform you prior to the period that they need you to work, must inform you prior to that time that they want you to work overtime. The day observed as a day of religious worship, people tend to look at this as a Saturday or a Sunday. The law says that if you are a religious person, you are the employer supposed to allow you to have that day off as a day of worship. However, there are some persons who we all know are not religious, do not worship anywhere, but want that Sunday or Saturday off every week. It is a give and take thing. You need to be able to at least work on a Sunday or a Saturday if required to. That's my personal view. If the offense, however, if the employer forces an employee to work overtime or do not allow them to observe that day as day of religious worship, the fine is $50,000 to imprisonment or 3 years or to both. In addition, an occupier who dismisses or otherwise penalizes a shop assistant for refusing to work overtime, refusing to work on a day of religious worship, is guilty of an offense and liable, I would have said that before, to imprisonment. So what we suggest here at the Labor Department is that the employer and the employee have some kind of discussion before making outrageous decisions as it relates to the overtime and the days of worship. The occupier must ensure that there are adequate facilities for washing and drying hands and eating. F5 shop assistants or more, there must be adequate room provided, that is the lunchroom. All right, the occupier must ensure that the employees have adequate facilities for eating lunch. It is recommended that if it is a small space, the occupier should separate an area with a screen for eating of meals. There must be a separation between the employer and the employee and the members of the public. However, where it is in a mall setting, the occupier must provide all the employees of the mall with adequate facilities. So you're now looking out for all the shops within your mall, all the employees that work in the shops within your mall, with adequate facilities for eating their lunch. Must have access to water to wash hands and things like that in that nature. If this is not done, the chief labor officer can determine the facilities for eating meals if the facilities for eating meals are adequate. If the facilities are not adequate, the CLO has the right to give directions to the occupier, or in the case of a mall, or the owner, for making the facilities accurate. This is where the labor officers come in. When we go out in the field, these are some of the things that we look for. We make sure that there are screens where the public, as I said before, the public cannot see the members of staff taking their lunch. In some cases, you find a mall in the mall setting. It may be a mall that has adequate room on the upstairs. I would have done a shop like that on Bridgetown, and the lunchroom was actually upstairs. So the workers would, when it is that time, would go to the upstairs and eat. And there's facilities for the microwave and the fridge and that kind of thing, pipe, that kind of thing. Employment of shop assistants at night. This is at 14.1 of your Shops Act. No shop assistant shall be employed during the night unless the occupier obtains a certificate from the chief labor officer seeking permission to do so. When an employer have to work at a night, the occupier has to send a form to the Labor Department, has to apply to the Labor Department. There's a form that we would fill out then after we do our own investigations. The investigations are, one, to ensure that there's adequate transportation arrangements for the workers, and security measures are put in place for each employee. As it relates to transportation, we know that there's a lot of carpooling where one employee can travel with another. That is acceptable. In addition to that, the employees, if the person works over past 11 and over, that employer has to ensure that the person at least can get to the bus terminal where they can connect to their homes. See, as it relates to the security measures, we are looking at things like proper lighting, make sure that the doors have proper locks and stuff like that. So those are some of the issues that you could face if the persons have to work at night. But what we're asking from the employers is that you make sure that these things are in place, because the Labor Department, if these things are not in place, the certificate will not be granted. So carpooling, as I said before, is a good way of making sure that your co-worker was able to get home safely. Fire safety certificate. The law says that before an employer opens a shop, they need to apply to the chief fire officer in order to get an inspection conducted. This certificate, if it is approved, the certificate is valid for 1 year. It says that no shop should be open for business unless there is a fire safety certificate. Even if you are provided with this certificate, the fire service officers visit your establishment and recognize that there is a breach in some areas, that fire certificate, safety certificate, can be withdrawn. So you make sure that you have all fire safety issues taken care of before you invite the fire chief into your establishment. There's a fine. Failure to comply can result in a fine of $50,000 or imprisonment for 1 year or both. The chief labor officer, labor officers, or police may enter at any time and inspect any shop to ascertain whether provisions are being complied with. What this is saying is that the labor officers, through the chief, goes into any establishment. We can visit any shop within the parishes. Each officer is assigned to a particular parish, and what we do is go out there and inspect, make sure that everything is in place. For example, we ensure that the NIS statutory deductions are being paid. There are provisions for seating for the cashier, adequate supply of drinking water, sanitary facilities, firefighting equipment. Must ensure that there's a firefighting equipment. Most persons have fire extinguishers right? Fire blankets. But if you have the fire extinguisher, you need to ensure that it was the fire service personnel visited and it is intact, ready for use if anything happens. Okay, in conducting the inspections, we also make sure that the employer or the occupier are providing the employees with pay statements. This is a requirement based on the Employment Rights Act. You must provide the employees with pay statements, proper ventilations. We would have discussed that before, but these are the things that we look for when we go out into the field. We check persons' wages record to make sure that the persons are being paid fairly. We recognize that some persons may try to trick the system. When we go to check the records, we recognize that some persons have two books, or we are told later, some persons have two books, one for the labor officers and one for the business. That is not a good thing to do. We need to make sure that you are following the legislation. The law here says that it is an offense for an employer to, every employer is guilty of an offense, whether by himself or any person employed by him or acting under his directions. If he refuses to allow the labor officers to do their job, when we go into your establishment, we expect you to comply with us. If you fail to admit, obstruct, then the chief labor officer can bring charges against you. There's a penalty when we get to that. Every person who commits an offense against this act for which no other penalty is provided is liable on summary convictions to a fine of $10,000 or 1 year imprisonment or to both. So it's important that when the labor officers come around to conduct their investigations, you comply with the law. I don't want to get there yet. So just let me go back to see if there's anything more that I would want to put to you before. I believe some of you will be taking notes, so I guess this would be a good way for you to complete writing. Oh, if Christmas falls. If Christmas falls, is all right. Sorry about that. Someone was querying if Christmas falls on a Sunday, um, what happens? If Christmas falls on a Sunday, it is recognized as Christmas Day. It is the bank holiday that matters, and the bank holiday, or public holiday as we call it, is never on a Sunday. But the Christmas can be celebrated on the Sunday. Okay. I have some questions that someone sent to me, so just looking at it, see if I can share them with you. All right, someone was asking if there is supposed to be a 15-minute break. That is the area when I spoke about lunchtime. Break, the 15-minute break is not addressed in the legislation. The legislation speaks about meal time, or as we say, lunchtime, and that is 1 hour, 60 minutes. But it does not address the break. What happens is the employer, the onus is on the employer if he wants to give 15 minutes break. I recognize, and the other labor officers contested this. We go out to shops and our persons call into the labor department and say that the employer would not give them the 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. Is not addressed in law, as I said. So if the owner does that for you, that is good, but he's not obligated to. All right, someone wants to find out about the records. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, another person queried about records. The employer or the occupier, it is vital that you keep records for each week for the employees. Things that will be included are things like the employment during each week. For example, did you work 40 hours within that week? And looking back over time, he should be able to say, or she should be able to say, yes, Heather Holder worked 40 hours 2 months ago. That is because you have records to show that I actually worked. The number of hours each shop assistant work, that is important as well. Did I work 8 hours? Did I work 6 hours within that week? And as I said before, the record keeping is very important because it's an ease of reference. You can always go back down the road and look for something that you did not recall. All right, yes, I will say that someone asked if overtime is mandatory, if written in the contract. Yes, a contract is a meeting of the minds between two persons. Yes, I would say it is mandatory. If you wrote it in your contract, you should live up to your contract. So yes, I would say it is. I hope that the person that asks about the document records, I hope the person is clear. If you are not, you can indicate that to the others who are fielding the questions, and I would respond again. All right, so if the participants, if you have all the information you need, the short act is very small act, is not a big act at all. So if you have the information that you want, if you're writing or whatever, I can open the floor that you can ask the question. All right, so I would open the floor. Okay, if you have any questions, could you just raise your hand? Zola Sears, you have a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, good morning. How are you doing today?
Hi, good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine too.
Okay,
So
great.
you have a question?
Yes, I did not manage to get on as early as I would have liked to.
Mm-hmm.
I was on though from about 10:30, so
Mm-hmm.
I managed to get the last part. But
Yeah.
my question is surrounding basically the lunch or meal time. So you work at a company, but you don't necessarily work full shifts. Your shift is maybe sometimes 4 hours, it's sometimes 2 hours. Um, how would you incorporate getting lunch into that, or
Okay.
are you entitled to that?
Well, what I will say is normally a lunch hour is not paid for. And if you're only working 4 hours in a day, the legislation says that you have to be working at least 4.5 consecutive hours. So if you're working 4 hours, I believe that you can, yourself and the employee can arrange something so that you can have like a 10 minutes break as opposed to the actual lunch time, which is the hour. And in particular, if you're being paid on an hourly basis, it would affect you so much if you um, only working 4 hours but trying to get an hour's lunch. Then you only get paid for 3 hours. So to me, that
Understood.
makes sense.
Okay, so if you're working like 7 hours, then you
Yes,
can have a break.
yes, yes.
Oh, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. Carolyn Coltrus, you have a question for us? Carolyn Coltrus? Carolyn Coltrus, you have a question for us?
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Oh,
Good,
good, thanks.
good morning and
Good morning.
welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful session. The
Thank
young
you.
lady just asked something similar to what I was asking. If your employee works from four to, from 8 until 4, um, and they're asked that they finish at 4 instead of 5 to take their
Mhm,
lunch hour from 4 until 5, can that
mhm.
work as well?
Yeah, that can, but it has to be an agreement between the employer and the employee. So that
Okay.
that would have to be discussed between you two. But it can work. I would have done shop inspections over time where the employee says that that's what happened in their company. The persons like to leave a bit earlier, so they allow them to take the hour at that for 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. So, but
Okay.
it has to be discussion.
Okay, and the next question, if you operate a family business as you would have spoken about
Yeah,
in the shop
yeah.
ad, and
Mhm,
it's mainly family members, you said that the
mhm.
working hours for bank holidays are 8:30 to 4:30?
But don't forget, in a family business, you make your own arrangements as it relates to how you want to work. Because
Mm-hmm.
in a family business, you are not supposed to have employees. We
Okay.
recognize that sometimes when we go out, you might still have a family shop, but you might still have a strange person working in there. But the
Mm-hmm.
law speaks against that. So you're supposed to have a family shop is supposed to be family only.
Okay.
Right.
So there is no restriction on the times?
No, no,
Okay.
because it's not considered to be a shop in that way where Well, you still have, you will still have to adhere to the closing and that kind of thing, but it's a family shop, right?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling. Mr. Wendell Harvey, you have a question for us? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Harvey, you have a question for us? Mr. Harvey, Wendell Harvey. Oh, he took down his hand. Are there any more questions? Christina, do you have a question for us?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. How are you today?
I'm very well, and thank you for this webinar. I have two
You're
questions.
welcome.
In the case of a monthly paid employee, would that still fall under the Shops Act guidance?
Yes, and they have persons who work in shops, considered to be shops, are monthly paid. Remember in the presentation, I said that I was looking for the form. I listed a few things, a few places which are considered to be shops, even though they are not the one door thing or whatever, like a restaurant and those kind of things. You might find persons at big restaurants in Barbados being paid on a monthly basis.
Okay, I have two questions regarding that. I saw that you mentioned lunch hours are not paid by the employer. Is that a choice or that's just the law?
It is the law, but if you want it to be a choice, it has to be a discussion between you and your employer, but it is the legislation.
And the last thing is that I wasn't aware that you have to keep track of lunch times taken. So the same way you will follow shift times or whatever the case is, you still need to log.
Yeah, that is in the records.
In the records, yes, please.
Yes, you need to keep.
So you need to track that.
Yes, records. You know, we can't always rely on our brains.
Oh no,
right?
no.
So it is better to have records where you
Very
can look
much so.
back. Right.
Yes, I just wasn't aware that that was one of the things that needs to be kept.
Yeah, the law addresses that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, ma'am. Have a good day.
You as well.
Ms. Sears, you're answering a question. Zola Sears?
Hi, yes, I just want one other question. The 2 rest days, are they mandatory regardless of the number of hours worked, or are they only entitled, let's say if you have worked 40 hours?
Or what the law says is that I don't think I had mentioned that when I was doing the presentation. If you work at least, you have to have, after working at least 12 hours, it says 12 hours in the legislation, you should be given, oh, you said the rest is? Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, rest days.
Yeah, two, you should have rest. I was looking at the rest period. Yeah, at least two off days. Two off days. Normally or preferably, persons would be given, and you find employers will more tend to give like the Sunday and one day in the week, right? But either way is okay. If you want to give persons rest period 2 days in a week, that is okay.
Okay.
Right. But people tend to do one in the week and one on the weekend. That can,
Noted. All right, thank you.
you're welcome. Alison Benedict. Alison Benedict. Alison Benedict. Alison Benedict. Miss Benedict. Miss Reed. Miss Reed, you're hearing me? Good morning. Is this Miss Reed?
Hello?
Miss Reed?
Hello?
Who am I speaking to? Good morning.
You hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Who am I speaking to?
This is Miss Reed. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning,
Can
ma'am.
you tell me about sick days? How are sick days viewed in the Shops Act? I know some workplaces have that some employees are paid like for 6 sick days or so. I just want to know how would that be dealt with the Shops Act?
Well, it is not the six days that you're referring to. That is not addressed in the legislation.
Okay.
That is what we consider as customs and practices. So you would not find that in the legislation. What we do is encourage the employer to allow to pay the persons for 6 sick days. But as I said, it is not legislated.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Coltrane? Ms.
Yes.
Coltrane?
Good
Hi,
morning.
good morning. Good morning.
Let's say that some person, the employee, has is off Saturday and Sunday,
Mhm.
but during the week they called and said that they cannot make it to work Thursday, which is the day they're supposed to work. When you ask them to work this Saturday, would they have to be paid? How would that how would you pay them?
Let me, before I answer you, are you registered for tomorrow's session?
Yes.
Okay, the officer would address this issue tomorrow. I know I haven't had a note that she's going to be working with the sick leave and vacation pay and all these tomorrow. So you
Okay.
get a chance to hear everything. So just make a note of your question so that you can answer tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. I'll take 3 more questions before we conclude. Christina?
Hi.
Hi, good morning.
To compound on what Ms. Zola Sears was asking about, what was it? Off days.
Mhm.
As long as you are have registered employees, is it standardized to have the 2 days off, or is it based on their number of hours?
Well, persons need to be able to rest.
Yes.
It is in legislation that you're supposed to have.
Oh, okay. Regardless of shifts or
Yeah, but
any of that.
if your shift is one that is not, you don't have long hours or whatever, you make the decision. It is important to speak to your employees, and we have something sorted out.
Okay.
Because yeah, the law says that you should have 2 off days, but if you're not working for 40 hours and you're only doing a little 10 hours, then it's a give and take. You
You
speak to
could
the
schedule
employer.
it exactly on
Right,
a one-on-one basis.
right, right. That would make sense.
Very nice. Thank you so
Because
much.
at 10 hours, you will need 2 off days, that kind of way. So have a discussion. Right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Emerson? Emerson?
Yes, I'm here. You can hear me?
Yes. Yes, I'm hearing you. Go ahead with your question, please.
As it relates to off days, those 2 off days, are there at the discretion of the employee, or can the employer, or can the employee request certain off days or a certain off day?
More often than not, you will find that the employer, who is the manager, would sort out those days. However, if you, the employee, have a problem, or you might have a particular thing that you want to do on a particular
Appointment
day,
day.
right? So nothing is wrong with asking to allow you to be off on a Thursday rather than a Tuesday. Nothing is wrong with that. But again, it involves discussion,
Okay.
right? So
But I'm
have a
not,
discussion.
but I'm not speaking of where you're going to request that you have every Thursday off.
Right, I understand.
You have an appointment and you want a particular day where you can request that day off.
Yeah, yeah, you can request a day. Nothing is wrong with that. And as you said, you don't need to have that Thursday off every week, but only
Right.
that one day because you have an appointment or something like that. Discussion, have a discussion with the employee, and that should be sorted out.
Okay, so at the end of the day, then still it all depends on the employer then.
Yes,
Okay, then.
thank you. All right, last question from Ms. Coltrus.
Yes, please. With the COVID, saying that we did not, this is unexpected. Are there any new protocols that the Ministry of Labor would give advice to the employees and employers as it relates to, like, if persons have to work from home? Because the question about the 2 off days and the hours work, to make it more flexible for the employer and the employee when it comes to working hours, putting in the 40 working hours, whether it be at home, at work, and the 2 off days.
So you want to know if the Labor Department have any protocols in place
Yeah.
to address that?
Yes.
No, we don't.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna take my last question. Or last 2 questions. Marcia Adams Charles. Marcia Adams Charles. Marcia Adams Charles. Marcia Adams Charles, are you hearing me? Marcia? No, very, very, very faint. No, you're very far away. All right, pose the question. Let me see if I can hear.
I just wanted you to elaborate on the employees when they're want to leave and not finish their task.
When they do what?
When they're like I said, they're working from 8 to 4 and they have not completed their task.
Mm-hmm.
You have right to have them complete their task before they go.
Well, this is what I said. We have persons that might come to the labor department and see the employer forcing them to work overtime. But when we check, we recognize it's something that you were doing a part of your job, cutting up letters or something like that. And because it's 4:30, you want to go. That is not good, right? Obviously, if you leave letters on the table, it's going to spoil, right? So what you want to find out is
I wanted to find out if it's the law, because if it's the law, then we could mandate and make it happen if it is happening. We just want to make sure that if we are doing it and the employee comes to the labor office, that we are not feeling guilty.
oh dear, I can't hear her good. I'm not hearing the last part. Your voice real far away.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
okay. I had in my earphone.
Oh, okay. So you want to know what if these persons walk away from the job
Yeah, because
before
I
completing
see
the
I see
task?
a lot of this here happen, and sometimes it might not be indication. It might be, for instance, a person putting up chairs or doing something else different. And you
Mhm.
mentioned the kitchen part. I can understand the lettuce part. But if it is another type of job and their time is up and they
Mhm.
want to leave, and I'm saying if the staff member comes to you and say this
Mhm.
here that we are asking them to work, over their time, and
Mhm.
are we penalized? Because we would need to know if it only depends on a certain task.
No, it is not on a certain task. That is the example that I was using. But
Mhm.
you should have something in your manual which speak what where it would show you what can be done if an employee do a particular thing, like for warning and that kind of thing. Do you have one of those manuals in place?
I would have to follow up on it. Maybe it is, but I
Mhm.
know sometimes this year can happen. So I guess with knowing
It could
that now
happen,
this is something that we will have to look at to make sure that it's not happening.
right? Okay. Thank you.
One moment, please. One moment. Don't go. Don't
Okay,
go.
I'm still here.
Are the staff able to request staunch off days? I mean, a while years ago, we used to hear that they're entitled to one staunch off day. Is that still the law, or was that?
There's not in our legislation. So it would
Okay.
have to be a decision between you and your employee. How you want it, that's what I say. I
Mhm.
told someone just now, the employer is manager and you would manage. If you want to provide them with a particular off day, that is
Mhm.
day and another day, that is fine. But
Mhm.
what I was saying to the gentleman,
Mhm. Sorry about that.
you have to, yeah. But what I was saying to him is he's asking for 1 day to go to an appointment. Nothing is wrong with that. But
Mhm.
your question is if the legislation says that you have a staunch off day. No, it does not. I've never seen that in the legislation.
Oh, okay. So it all depends on the company and the
On the
yeah,
company,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
But we would still want persons to be fair,
Mm-hmm.
right? We would still want the employer to be fair to the employee.
Understood. Understood. Thank you.
You're
You're welcome.
welcome. Have a
Have a
good
good
day.
afternoon.
You
Okay,
too.
bye.
Elsa Yearwood? Miss Yearwood?
Hello, can
Yes,
you hear
this
me?
is the yes, Miss Yearwood. This is the last caller. Can you go
Okay,
ahead with your question?
I am following on from the question that the person asked previously, where she was given an example of a person putting up chairs, for
Here.
example, and then they
Mm-hmm.
want to stop in the midst of it. I recall
Mm-hmm.
from your slides you said that the employer should provide the employee with adequate notice of overtime before
Yeah.
overtime actually begins. So in a case like
Mm-hmm.
that, and a person is in the midst of putting up chairs, the employer recognizes that there are still more to be put away, wouldn't they have to provide adequate notice, or at least if the employee has something to do that they cannot stay? I saw you mention warning letters, etc., but in that case, wouldn't they be excused?
Yeah, but if you are in the midst of putting up chairs and 4:30, let's say 4:30, for example, came, we wouldn't expect, and you could not have given the person adequate notice because you didn't know, I would imagine that you didn't know how long the chairs would take to put up. So you couldn't give adequate notice. But then the same way I talk about fairness just now, the employer expect the employer to be fair. The employee too has to be fair, because you can't be putting up chairs and because it is 4:30, just leave. How fair that is to
But
the employer,
I can
right? That is,
understand that. Say, for example, the employee had made arrangements to go somewhere before time. I mean, it's not that every single employee decides that they are not staying to put up the chairs, but say the employee has somewhere that they have to be by a certain time, like the class or whatever, wouldn't that employee be allowed to be excused in this instance?
well, if you have someone else that can assist, you might have another employee that can assist in continuing his work.
Okay, understood.
Right, so then the person can be excused because the person would have told you prior to the leaving that he or she had an appointment, right, or had to go to classes or whatever case. But if you have someone that is willing to assist, then the person would be free to go, and I don't see where punishment would come in.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you. Have a good day.
You
Okay, all right. This is the end of the presentation. I hope that all the questions that you needed answered were answered. If that was not done, you can feel free to call me, Heather Holder, at the Labor Office. My number is 535-1512. My email address, let me call that again, 535-1512. My email address is hholder@labor.gov.bb. That is hholder@labor.gov.bb. I hope you enjoy the session. Bye-bye. Thanks for participating.
Breaking news for our viewers in the West. A stunning report just out. It shows a record-shattering 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week. That is double last week's record report.
I have the money in the bank right now to pay my April 1st rent, but that's it. So what about, feeding my son and paying my bills and...
Now, hundreds of thousands of jobs are being lost around the world. The coronavirus pandemic paralyzes almost every part of the global economy.
Even wrap your head around these gigantic numbers.
I don't know how long this is going to go on for, and that scares me.
COVID-19 pandemic has caused 2020 to be one of the most challenging years in recent history, not just for Barbados, but for countries across the world. Economies are crumbling and persons are losing their jobs. The Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, in association with the International Labour Organization, has partnered to offer persons who have been impacted by COVID-19 3 courses to help further their development. They are social skills, occupational health and safety, and entrepreneurship. Upon completion of the program, each participant will be given a certificate of participation, which they can then use with their next job application. The social skills program is currently being offered. The occupational health and safety program will be offered from August 17th, and the entrepreneurship program will follow. These programs will be offered until September 30th, 2020. All you have to do to sign up is visit labour.gov.bb. I hope you guys take advantage of this opportunity, visit the website and sign up. And that's it. Stay safe.